All right. This is Tribal Knowledge and Agile Teams. My name is Jeffrey Miller. I work for Manifest Solutions. Been in the industry a long time. I think I just passed my 25th year in the industry. I do Microsoft development historically, also Neo4j, and I'm working as a continuous delivery lead at my client. About 3 years, we oversee DevOps tools. And as you can tell, I'm speaking at a conference, so the bullet says conference speakers, so not hard to figure out. But I'm also a children's author. We did a children's book a few years ago to help with our adoption, and the proceeds, part of the proceeds help others adopt as well. It's called Skeeters. It's about a gang of mosquitoes fighting Wendell for control of the backyard. So it's a fun read. My boss, Chris Judd, wrote a children's book as well, probably about 10 years prior, and we ended up hiring the same illustrator, so it was a pretty cool effort. I'm also an adoptive dad, as I said, adoption. This is my son, Lincoln. That's our family. So he's going to be 4 in September, so going through the, what is it, terrible twos and then three-nager, I think is what they call it. So since this is a talk about tribal knowledge, this is my only slide. I don't want anybody to write things down. Don't take any notes. We're just going to talk about it and then walk out and forget what we said. Is that all right? So I'm actually lying. There are slides, but the question is, what is tribal knowledge? Well, according to Wikipedia, tribal knowledge is information known within a tribe or a group of people, a team, but unknown to outsiders. So I want you to imagine, and this actually happened to me in some form, that you're on an assignment, you just joined the team, and you're like, all right, I'm finally getting used to things. I'm going to write some code, check it in, and so you do that. You commit it, and about 10 minutes later, someone comes by your desk and says, yeah, that's not exactly how we do things around here, and they didn't tell you how they expected you to do it. So what you hear is you're doing it wrong, right? So you're probably, all you can do is say, I'm sorry, I didn't know, nobody told me what the expectations were, what the standards were. And you're probably feeling a little embarrassed. You're like, ugh. You might be frustrated, like, why don't they tell me? And then angry because they're like at your desk giving you you're doing it wrong. I call that a tribal knowledge fail. It's not a popular hashtag. I put the underscores in there because you got to separate the words and all that stuff. But if you look it up, you might see it somewhere. I could post on it later, but this is what you feel like, right? You feel like you're apart from everybody else. They know what you don't know, and you're the lone outsider. But I want you to stop, take a breath. Now look at your neighbor and tell them it's not your fault. Go ahead. It's not your fault, all right? It's not. It's the fault of the system, the process, or the lack thereof. So basically the problem is tribal knowledge, right? Tribal knowledge, that insider knowledge that you don't always have access to. So what you don't know can cause problems. Leaks can cost you if you're waiting for answers. That's waste. You can introduce defects, cause outages. There's standards and compliance that you might violate. So, and then you have to go back and rework things. That change that I did in that assignment, I had to go redo that with the new knowledge now. When do leaks happen? Well, you probably all have worked with someone that, well, maybe not got fired, but maybe they said, I quit, right? Either they quit or they get fired. Everything in their head walks out the door with them. And, if it's a sudden thing, if they're fired, it's like, before you pack up your box, can we do a knowledge transfer session before you walk out the door? It just doesn't work that way, right? Somebody gets promoted to a new role, right? They were on the team, I'm moving up. I did a good job, but now they moved up, and maybe they've got new responsibilities. It's just not something they have time for to go back and document what they did. Retirement, baby boomers, right? They're all starting to kind of retire out. You're out sick. Anybody know of something that would make you out sick these days? Or you're on vacation. I like to give the example of, imagine you have Alex on your team and loves comics, heads off to Comic-Con, and he's the only developer that knows exactly how the script works, that keeps everything held together. And you can always tell when something goes wrong on vacation, because when you come back, they're like, well, I hope you had fun. So is it a vacation or is it a nightmare, right? And unfortunately, people do pass away, right? I worked on a project where we got an email that said, the subject matter expert on this died suddenly. It was before COVID, but they said we'll have to transition to somebody else. We'll make do, right? Now, why is this hard? Well, you can't know everything. That's why you have all of us together that work on solving problems. Tacit knowledge, that's such a weird word, tacit, right? How many times in a day do you use that in conversation? It's just that known but unspoken, unwritten knowledge. It's hard to transfer, right? You can know a lot of things, but you don't just go around saying, let me tell you about what I know. Usually it's reactive. And if you know a lot, you know so much that it's hard to distill that in a form that's easily graspable by new people. Now, Agile Manifesto. What does it say they prefer over comprehensive documentation? Working software, right? Now, the little clause at the end of the Agile Manifesto says, while we, appreciate the things on the right, we appreciate the things on the left more. Somewhere that got lost in translation, and people say, well, it's Agile, so we don't document anything. Like, ever, period, That's not true. Like, there is room for that, and that's part of what I'm talking about. There are no silver bullets. Knowledge gets created all the time, and as you're creating it, you're like doing the work. You're not doing the work, okay, let me, write this down, type up a standard operating procedure. Eventually you might need to, but what is in the way? Not enough time, right? We got to deliver features, build the software. Maybe you've tried it before and people are just like, yeah, that didn't work. It never works. Maybe you've forgotten the stuff, right? And maybe something went really wrong and it's like, oh, we really need to document this stuff. But then time passes and people just forget. The urge to do it just fades. And I've heard the phrase, never waste a crisis, right? You should use those moments to make changes. Management, maybe your team, that are not interested in it. And interruptions. You go to lunch, you come back from lunch, it was really good, and you forget what you were doing for the first half of your day. I do that. I don't know if anybody else does that. Managing transitions is a thing I'm working on, and I've got these little door hangers on the back of my door that it's like a whiteboard door hanger. I put 2 labels on there that says now and next. And I'm supposed to write on there as I'm going to lunch in my house what I was doing right now and what I'm going to do next. They're still hanging on the back of my door, needless to say. But I did get the Amazon 5-pack discount, so I was at least good there. But there are no silver bullets. Often, we wear a lot of hats. Fewer people, you got the great resignation, attrition. And so as people leave, you're asked to do more things, on a regular basis. So, if you've got a lot of responsibility, there's task switching, thrashing. So what's the solution? Well, first is to resolve to not do this again, right? Let's not get in this situation again. So I want you to pretend that we can travel back in time, and you're at that desk again. So you're sitting there, you turn in your code, and they walk to your desk and they say, yeah, we don't usually do it that way. Well, imagine that you're smiling because now you go, yes, this is a problem we can fix. So, first strategy, create a knowledge playbook. Now, I have a website, it's called knowledgeplaybook.com. It's not a plug yet. You'll see it on our slides. That will be a plug. But Knowledge Playbook is a collection of important knowledge that you need for your job, your team needs. Things like situational guidance. Now, when I think of a playbook, we're at OSU today. Go Bucks. Football's right around the corner. And if you know much about football, you know that there are certain situations where your options are driven by what the situation is. Situational guidance says, if I'm behind the line of scrimmage, well, if I'm back from the first down marker, and I'm like down 15 yards, on third down, my options are pretty limited. Depends on when it is in the game, but you're like, okay, they're gonna throw the ball. I mean, if they're gonna run it on third down, then you yell at the coach through the television because they're not doing the right thing, but there are things that are situational. We know about Gherkin, right? Given, when, then, and behavior-driven development. Reference material, all the boring stuff, right? Checklists, that's a big one. I'm a big fan of checklists. I actually have a public speaking checklist that I have in a folder that I will pull out after I'm done to see what I screwed up this time. Templates, that's a big one. What can you reuse that will avoid problems in the future? Questions. I'm not asking for questions, I'm saying questions are in your playbook. Anybody think of a question in an Agile? The definition of done, and is it done, right? That's an anti-pattern. I like to use the acronym KIT, and I define it as keep it together. So what you want to do, you need a knowledge base. Now, depending on your environment, that could be a wiki, it could be MS Teams, it could be OneNote, any of those will work. Pick one and then commit to it. You got found references you put in, troubleshooting notes, just keep investing in it as a team. Do not delay. If you don't have one yet, start one. It doesn't have to be for the whole team, start one for yourself. I like Wiki a lot, and there are several important factors that make Wiki work. Number one is participation is welcome by default. Typically within a group at least, anybody can edit. I have contributed to Wikipedia. I wouldn't call myself a Wikipedian, but I do correct an occasional spelling error, and they don't undo the change. I'll link to a topic. And it was funny, I was doing a search on my Twitter handle, which is also my Wikipedia handle, and I found, I think it was a Google book search, I'm credited in the back of some kind of software testing book as one of the contributors to, like 500. In the footnotes, they put it in the back, and I've got my internet handle in the back of some book because I fixed a typo. It's cool, okay. Open source, not quite. Information is more discoverable, and you can also establish intent. Wiki is great because you can create links that don't point to anything, but they will if somebody clicks on it, because as soon as they click on it, they go, would you like to create this? Which kind of puts them in a spot because they were really wondering what the information was, and now you're going like, you're the dude. But at least you can put things like, I put things in there like top 10 most wanted topics. Okay, well that one you're gonna know that it's not in there yet, but things like database standards, if you're on a team that works with that. And it's easy to update stuff that's out of date. What is worth capturing? Anybody like paper and pen? See a couple? Awesome. All right, the first thing you need to do, before you get the wiki going, start with yourself. I've got a Bullet journal that I've kept for a long time. I'm kind of in between methods, but and I don't draw the pictures. You know, you got whole YouTube channels about how to make it look like a butterfly. I don't do that. But paper can be useful. I do have a lot of resources, notes I've taken, things I've written in paper that I really want to digitize, and I do. This is a picture of my grandfather's journals. He's now passed. For 60 years, he kept an everyday journal. And we have that now to look at. My aunt is like the curator of these, but we borrowed them from the collection. He was a missionary to Brazil during World War II. So you can imagine. And what's funny is this, the date on this entry is actually tomorrow in 1944, just by coincidence. And it's so neat to be able to learn things about him that I wouldn't know otherwise. Anybody use OneNote, Evernote? You like it? Who's an Evernote user? Ooh, okay. I like Evernote. I've got it. I've got OneNote. I've actually got too many tools, and that's a problem. But who has Evernote in their work setting? OneNote. OneNote in your work setting. Lots of hands. Do you use it as an independent app or built into Teams? Depends. You can plug it into Teams, which is an interesting option because Teams has a wiki module for your space and it has OneNote. So pick your poison. More docs can do. I have mixed feelings about it. I don't like editing in OneNote because it's not Word. And I don't like editing in Word because it's not OneNote. So I don't know what to do there. Whiteboard photos. I take pictures of whiteboards. There's a good app called Cam Scanner. I don't know if you've heard of it, but there's also Office Lens. Office Lens will take pictures of whiteboards. And what's nice about that is they like clean up the glare. They just get you the information. And if you drop that into OneNote, OneNote can actually search that content. It recognizes handwriting, so that's pretty cool. I use mind maps. My app of choice is called Free Plane. Anybody do mind maps, paper or otherwise? One. What do you like to use?
Paper.
Yeah? There's a lot of guidance that says that doing it on paper exercises your brain differently than doing it with a digital tool, but I do both. So, screenshots. I can't tell you how many times I've gone back to, I take screenshots. I don't document them right away necessarily, but if I'm installing something, if I'm setting something up, I know I'm going to need to document it later. Tools like Snagit will just let you keep logging them. Snagit costs money. It's not super expensive. I think it's under $100. So it's easy to kind of get approval for it. There's also GreenShot if you're able to install free tools at your place of business. All right, next thing, retrospectives. Who does retrospectives in here? All right, do you feel like you learned your lesson? Do you ever go back and review them? Who goes back and reviews them to learn and like change for next time?
I try to take takeaways from that retrospective and put it in my Outlook to do if they're really things I
Very good.
feel like I want to implement with the team.
In the format that we use on my team, the last thing we do in the retrospective is things we can improve. And if it's compelling enough and we see it often enough, we'll make a card on our board out of it, so at least there's that. This is the NASA Lessons Learned database. Super cool. It's kind of amazing that they put all this out for the public because it's all their successes and their failures. If you want to look up their after-action reports on the Challenger disaster, you can see that in here. If you want to see how the Mars rover kind of stopped working, you can see that in here. But it also has their successes, so they track their lessons learned, and it's open to the public too. So if you ever get a chance, look it up. I have been through lots of projects where it's kind of a death march. And you're like, man, that was really terrible. But I think it's good to name your lessons. Like, don't just be like, man, that was terrible. Okay, why was it terrible? Give it a name, right? That's part of the processing. Learn from it. Dump that into your personal, knowledge base or whatever. I mean, that's how I get this talk, right? Those lessons learned from bad experiences. Use retros in your planning. Put it in your backlog. Make cards out of it. Don't just go, okay, what did we do poorly this time? And if there's something that you want to keep doing, celebrate that. Reinforce it. Postmortems. The DevOps handbook talks about blameless postmortems, and what they do, and a lot of the last session was about Mang, which used to be Fang, and all the big fancy cloud companies. When they have a problem that causes an outage, they bring a lot of people to bear, and they do a blameless postmortem. They want to know why it happened, what went wrong. They're not looking to fire somebody. And usually what they'll do is they will make that person that caused the problem the champion of how not to do that again. So, I mean, I guess it's a mantle that you can carry if you deleted an entire database table, then you can be the don't delete the database table champion. I don't know. Improve your onboarding. We added 5 new people in the last 2 months. And we knew that we had to get them signed up for stuff, get them set up. But I think what I'd rather tell you about is my U-Haul experience. Anybody ever drive a U-Haul? Was it fun? Okay. All right, this is the tale of tow haul mode. Now, if you know what tow haul mode is, don't say anything. I don't want you to spoil it. What is this light? Tow haul. When I moved, we moved my wife down from Michigan, 2014. I reserved a 10-foot truck. You get there, they say, sorry, we don't have the 10-foot truck. Here's a 14-foot truck or a 20, right? They'll upgrade you at no charge, and you're like, oh, cool, I got more space. Got the mom's attic in the back, Stick all your extra boxes up there. Well, I saw this button too. What is this button? I don't know. Right? When I went to get the truck, they told me, don't pinch your finger, fill it back up with gas, when you're putting the door down. Fill it back up with gas. Here's how you turn the light off in the back of the truck. That's what they told me, right? They give you a sheet of paper you sign that says, you won't sue them or whatever. I drove about 250 miles with tow haul mode on, and I was getting about 8.9 miles a gallon, because it's got, right on the dash, it tells you how well you're driving with your gas mileage. I'm like, man, I've never driven a U-Haul before, but man, this is terrible, right? So about 7 miles from the pickup or the drop-off spot when we're returning the truck, I'm like, what's this button? So I hit the button, and the truck was a completely different truck. It was peppy, well, for a U-Haul. And I'm like, wait a minute, do you mean to tell me that this entire time I've been driving in some mode that cost me extra gas? So I'm like, okay, they didn't tell me this. So I went to U-Haul's website because I wanted to know, is it listed somewhere? And if you search for the words tow or haul on uhaul.com and expect to get like specific, meaningful results, it's not going to work very well. So I went to Google and I did a site search. If you don't know how to do that, go site:/something dot whatever, and it will give you results from just that domain. So that's probably worth $5, that tip alone. So I did not find references on tow haul mode. What I found instead were user reviews. I'm reading through all these responses about, well, let's look. Good service, truck worked okay. The light for tow haul mode was on the entire time. Clearer instruction on the how and why of tow haul indicator light. Okay, I guess they want clearer instruction. It wasn't a complete sentence, but it pops on as a default and greatly increases gas consumption if one isn't hauling A trailer pulling a car. Okay, I didn't have a car in tow. The staff was friendly. I wish the tow haul feature would have been explained to me in the beginning. All right, here's my favorite. I got into the truck and started it. The tow haul light was on. I called the office before I left to ask what the light was on for. The man in the office explained it to me without making me feel stupid. I really wish when I picked up that truck the first time I'd ever driven a U-Haul that they would have explained it. That is what good onboarding is all about, right? You don't want new people to have a bad experience just because you know everything about a U-Haul truck. That doesn't mean that oh, and by the way, I've learned based on my driving experience with the U-Haul, I drive way around other U-Haul drivers just in case they were like me, not a good experience. So always think like the new person. It's harder to do the longer you've been there, but always look at your situation and say, what would a new person be looking for? Consider their perspective, right? They're going to feel that anger, embarrassment, frustration if you don't do a great job at it. I think it's a good idea to update the docs together. So if you have like a developer setup document, give it to them and they're going to go through it. They're going to find problems, outdated versions, the instructions weren't clear. Great. Talk about it, work on it to update it, have them update it with your guidance. So you're not doing a lot of upfront work to, we've got a new person, we got to update the developer setup guide. Sure, you could do that. It's probably helpful. But that could be their first work assignment to make sure that stuff's up to date. Alistair Coburn said, now this is pre-COVID, pre-pandemic, pre-remote work, that sometimes the best documentation is not a document at all. You have two engineers get up in front of a whiteboard and one draws out the system and the other asks questions and you record it on video. I worked on an assignment probably, it's been more than 10 years ago, and we had a 4-year project and 20 people was the peak number that we had working on it. And we were knowledge transferring to 2 people to support that system. And I thought, we did 30 hours of training for these 2 people. I'm not going, see that camera over there? I took it. I decided to record a video because, I'm like, within a year, what if they're not here? Then all that training was wasted. So recorded it. Within 1 year, both those people were either reassigned or moved back to their home country. So I'm like, whew, that was a good plan. So we put it on a hard drive, gave it to the client, and they referenced it for several more years as needed. Bookmarks, I know, pretty boring, not rocket science. Googling takes a lot of time. So if you've got internal stuff or external stuff, how helpful would it be to just say, hey, here's your first day, here's all the links that you need, like prepared for you. Reference docs, SharePoint sites, we'll get to SharePoint in a minute. How to fill out your timesheet. You want to get paid, so nothing important. Undiscovered treasure is worthless. You've heard that if a tree falls in the woods and there's no one around to hear it, does it make a sound? It probably does, but it doesn't matter, right? It could be the best tree ever. Of course, if it falls over, it's not the best tree ever. But so, how many of you do documents or tools during an iteration? Anybody create docs?
Yeah, we do.
All right.
We do designs and we put them in a SharePoint folder.
Sure. You file them away. Oh, yeah. So I think that as part of your sprint review, your iteration review, show the code, but also show the docs that you created because those are resources for future use by your team. So that way, everybody else goes, oh, that's available, and they know who to ask, they know who worked on it. All right, we mentioned SharePoint, right? Put things where they can be found. Spell correctly. I was pretty good at spelling in school. I was in the 7th grade spelling bee, and there was like 7 people left out of, I don't know, 100 at my little school. And I lost because I did not say capital in front of the W when I was asked to spell Wednesday. Really? I'm not bitter, I swear. But, you know, old pain. Spelling correctly, if you're searching for it, and let's say you're in a corporate environment, and you don't have a Google search engine that says, did you really mean X? Like my Zagronaut Twitter handle always comes up as Argonaut, as someone asked. Did you really mean that? Well, if you misspell words, the red squiggle, do you ignore it? Or do you go back and go, oh, I misspelled it, let me fix that? Please fix it. Because somebody later might not know that you misspelled the word and, you know, it won't show up. Avoid acronyms and jargon to the extent that it makes sense. I mean, you know, I worked on the mainframe. They had this term called spoofy. I think it was SQL program using file input or something, right? But people are walking around using these crazy words. Hey, did you run the spoofy? What is that? Or you got meanings that are, like it can mean different things in different contexts, right? BI, what does BI stand for? Right? Well, my client, it was banking instance. Don't ask me what a banking instance is, but they're like, did you set up the BI yet? I'm like, we have that? Banking instance. And so you get this context matters, right? Make links from other places. So you need to, when you write in your OneNote, drop a link to somewhere else. Or in a comment from Jira, make a link to your OneNote page for it. Good titles are important. I think that as redundant as it may seem, it's good to include keywords in sub-items that would otherwise be very repetitive, right? So set up the database. Okay, well, if I'm looking at a list of things and they all say set up the database and I don't have something else to tell me what that's about, adding that information to the title of that thing is going to help, you know, depending on the context. Big and visible. Anybody use the big screens that have the build status, the monitoring? That's very helpful. I like posters. Now, posters don't matter as much when you're not in the office, but man, you have never lived until you printed out something on 11 by 14 paper. I'm just saying. I get excited about that. What is worth saving? Well, I find a lot of documents that either are neglected or just not talked about. Archaeology. This is a picture from my honeymoon in 2014. It's at Cajal Peche in Belize. And this structure here, they say it was a ball court. They think. They don't know what the rules were, but they think it was a game that they played there. So that's all that we know about this. And this is Fernando. If you have a tour guide that can help you, that's great. He was a great help through the site. So as you're going through things like you're a new person, if you're a new person, that's great. Use that opportunity to discover and help for the next person. All right, this is the graveyard, SharePoint, where information goes to die. I later changed that, I don't know if it's on this slide or not, to Shareberia, where information goes to starve and then die. I'm just kidding mostly, not really. Go on a scavenger hunt, raid SharePoint, right? I mean, I call them a digital dustbin. Whether it's a network drive or SharePoint, a lot of stuff gets created and it just collects digital dust, right? Bit rot, whatever you're going to call it. It's very helpful. They used to have a way to tag things in SharePoint. I think they removed that feature out of the product, unfortunately. But with Teams is actually sitting on top of SharePoint. I mean, that's a big secret. I don't know if they want you to know that or not, but If you look at the URL structure, it's like secretly it's SharePoint behind the scenes, and I'm like, hey, if it looks like Teams and it doesn't look like SharePoint, I can live with that. So mine your hard drive. If you're not connected to the network, the easy thing is to create a document on your hard drive. Don't leave it there. It's got to go to an environment where it can be shared, discovered. Now, right before this talk, I was about to pull up my slides. I was up till a certain time of the night this morning. I won't tell you what time it was because that would seem like I'm a last minute person. I did have a monster this morning, so that's okay. It looked like the last set of changes I had were X hour minus 3. I'm like, I worked for 3 more hours than that timestamp. Where's my slide deck? So I found it, thankfully. This is with the updates. But there are 2 kinds of computer users. Those who have lost data and those who will. So just remember that. Make sure that you share that information. Get it, up to your. We have OneDrive at the client. If you can store things on your OneDrive, I know it's a little bit complicated with the way that it syncs sometimes, but make sure you're sharing it. Anybody like email? I am terrible at email. I mean, my unread count is, I won't tell you the number of digits it is, okay? This is a first aid kit. We talked about discoverability. Guess where I found it? When I was looking for Post-its in the filing cabinet under, several other office products. I'm like, if I cut my finger, wouldn't I need to know where that's at? At this particular client, they had in the restroom, they had a traumatic wound kit. It's, they installed it. It's for like if there's a shooting or something really drastic. But if you cut your finger and you go into that traumatic wound kit, you're getting an email. This costs $75. If you go in there every time you cut your finger, we have to pay $75 for that. I'm like, well, where is it? I talked to the admin assistant. She's like, well, yeah, I sent out an email about that. And I went back and looked at my inbox from when she talked about it. Nothing. So the next client I went to, the first couple weeks I was there, was like, I want to see if this is the same here. So I went around looking for a first aid kit. It took me like 2 weeks to finally figure out where it was. I went up a few floors, asked the person. They're like, yeah, it's around here in a cabinet somewhere. Right? It's that discoverability. So if you're still in the office, know where your first aid kit is. Why is email so problematic? You got long threads. You don't know if somebody reads it, right? You send it out, and who thinks that if you send one email, your job is done? I don't know. I hear that all the time. Cluttered inboxes. Retention limits drive me crazy. A few years ago, they decided one day, legal decided that you don't need to email past a certain point because it's not subject to litigation at discoverability. And so I had project information from the beginning of a 4-year project, and they said, okay, 2 years is all we're going to keep. Anything beyond that gets deleted. I'm like, what? And it turns out accounting had emails from a while back that had software license keys in them. Oops. There are 2 kinds of computer users, those who have lost data and those who will. How can you make email work for you? Well, because I'm interested in tribal knowledge and onboarding, I will tag emails with smart categories called knowledge-based and onboarding. So if I get something, I'm like, I don't really have time to document this, but this email would be really good. Because how many times have somebody new comes and they're like, oh, let me forward you all these emails. If you can find them all, you don't find them right away. Quick steps in Outlook are really handy because you can just automate a couple steps of moving something into a folder. And then you got search folders. Anybody use search folders? Yes? Helpful, yeah? Yes. I've got one called Manager Mail. I've got one called Sent Items from Last Week. Like if I'm doing a status report or something, it's very helpful. It doesn't matter where it is in Outlook. If you have a search folder, it will surface it just like you would put it in a folder. It doesn't matter where else it is. So this is what that looks like. I've got, a blank screen. The pointer is pointing out for me. So knowledge base and onboarding, quick access, those kind of things. These are search folders that I've set up with those categories. So all I have to do when a new person comes is I go click on my knowledge base or onboarding folders. It's right there. Automate common responses. Frequently asked questions come through email all the time. So you say, here's my standard reply. But don't forget about the infrequent ones. It's the things that you do once a year, once every 6 months. You don't want to have to reinvent that every time, so keep a list of those. Email signatures. What you may not know is that you can add an entire body to an email signature. So if you have a common response, put a couple little, hey, thanks for blah, 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 so-and-so, then drop that signature in there, and that's the body of the rest of your response. OneNote, I use send to OneNote all the time. And I said retention limits. Well, that is how I get around it. Like if there's something really interesting or useful, I don't leave it in my inbox. In fact, leaving it in your inbox as a management tool is somewhat problematic. Checklists. Anybody ever add something to a list that you already did just so you can cross it off? Hey, I do it. Atul Gawande wrote a book called The Checklist Manifesto. He's a surgeon. Anybody heard of that book? Yeah. Like it? All right. I've got a copy that someone is going to walk away with today. So, as a surgeon, he was really interested in why the outcomes of surgical procedures are so sporadic and unpredictable sometimes. Why are there so many complications? He worked with the World Health Organization after a lot of research, and they came up with a checklist for surgery. They settled on 19 things for the checklist. They're like, before we put you under, can you tell us which leg we're amputating? That's one of them. They need to make sure that you've had antibiotics within an hour of surgery. Do they have enough blood products on hand? So before they get started, there's a list of things they go through before they administer anesthesia. Before they make the incision, there's a list of things that they go through. And you can imagine, different countries and different styles of working. These were kind of the things that they could generally agree on, but it is meant to be customized. And then before you leave, do we have all the instruments? Did we sew you up with the scalpel inside by accident or something? They check that. So, effective checklists. There's several things they recommend. Keep it to one page and use pause points. So what are the points in the process that you're doing that are good places to check? Checklists are not a tutorial. It's not a step-by-step instruction. It is to remind skilled people the things that they may have forgotten about this time. Maybe they were working on a presentation until the wee hours of the morning and they're only a couple hours of sleep, who knows. There are two types of checklists. This is an important distinction. There's the read-do checklist, where you look at each item, you read it, and then you do it. And then there's the do-confirm. Do-confirm says, okay, here's a list of things that when you're at that pause point, did you do all these? Yes, 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 no, ooh, yes, yes, right? You're not going through, okay, step 1, do it. Step 2, do it. Pilot's checklists are very much that way, the read-do. Like Sully that landed the plane in the river, they follow the checklist. There's a whole binder in the cockpit, right? We tried to use a checklist with another team, ops team, when I was on a development team, and had 3 or 4 meetings, and eventually they said, we're not doing this. The reason was because we were over-specifying. We were giving them all the instructions of what they should do. We should have gone with a do-confirm style. Here's the app to deploy. Did you make sure this was activated? Did you restart the service, restart the server? Automate your knowledge. In DevOps and Agile, you hear infrastructure as code. You hear these kind of things where it's like, okay, don't just write a document, write some code. I created something I call inspector views in the database. When I found a bug, I created a view that returns the data that matches that issue, and I left it there. Put a nice big comment in it that says, this should always be empty if you run it. If you select from it and you get data, then the problem is back. Templates. Anybody put a mail to link in a web page? Mail me at blah, blah, blah.com. Did you know that you can include in the parameter string a subject and a body? I like that because that allows me to create rules in Outlook. It says, hey, if you see something with this subject, which, people are lazy, if they click that link and it opens their Outlook, it puts a subject in for them, they're probably not going to, well, I don't like that subject, let me, tweak it. Embed mail to links in documents with the subject and the body. Put them in OneNote. Code generation. Code generation is super cool, a little bit advanced, but if you can reuse things that will eliminate sets of problems, that's helpful. I use a program called AutoHotkey. Anybody use AutoHotkey? Text completion, macros. Did you raise your hand? Awesome. All right, I'm not the weirdo in the room. Suddenly I'm one of a couple AutoHotkey fans. So, powerful questions. Now, we talked about the definition of, well, let's go to this one. Oh, that's right. Pardon me. All right. We don't want to leave people out, right? The onboarding, that kind of thing. So the question that you want to ask is, who have I missed? You do something, think about it. Say who, right? Then you got the questions, what is ready? Team agreements, we keep those in our knowledge base. We define what ready means. If we have not added, what does refined mean? If we have not added acceptance criteria, there's still work to be done to get it to where we need to work on it. What is done? Okay. Have you had it peer reviewed? And then is it done? That's the anti-pattern, because you want done to mean done and everybody to agree on it. What did we do last time? Okay, we're starting a new effort. Those retrospectives, those prior work, go back and look at that. And if you have that resource already built for you, then you can do that. Lunch and learn. Now, I think the most important word in this is not learn, I think it's lunch. And it is almost lunchtime, right? I think we got till 12:15 technically, so that's an excuse for me to look at my watch and see how I'm progressing. So, learn something new. Anybody ever host a lunch and learn? Yeah? Did you learn something in the process?
I did.
Yeah, you had to know your stuff, right? You can demonstrate your learning, practice your speaking skills, and if there's something that you want to get buy-in on, like I did a lunch and learn about SpecFlow at a client, which is a pretty cool .NET Gherkin processor, and they hadn't used it yet, but it allowed me to introduce it, and plus you get lunch. So, mentoring. Investing in other people. There are ways to document things that buy you something other than, hey, you got a Word document. Blog about it. Scott Hanselman, one of my favorite tech authors, tech personalities from a blog perspective, started his blog because he wanted to be able to remember the things that he had learned. And it was an interesting day, he said, when he went to look for an answer, searched Google, and it led him back to his own blog where he'd blogged about it years prior. So, pretty cool. GitHub. There are things called GitHub gists. So you can build an entire repo, but you can also create a code sample. I created one for Neo4j that, the Neo4j company has worked into their materials, called a graph gist. Stack Overflow. My Stack Overflow reputation score, 2 digits. I am not John Skeet, I'm just saying. I answered one question, and I think I got one. It's 26, by the way. I got 1 point for being like able to log in as myself. And then I answered one question, which is actually asked by a friend. So I'm like, all right, I get a couple points. But you can put stuff out on Stack Overflow that helps other people, and it's not just inside people in your group. Social media, blog about it, then tweet about it. So TDD and pair programming. Now, you can write docs all day long, but that experience doesn't come. You don't get the full impact of it unless you experience it, right? And if somebody can guide you through the doing of it as you're working on a new feature, that's incredibly valuable. Pull requests and code reviews. Anybody use GitHub for, or something that does pull requests? Yeah? Do you like pull requests? They work? I like pull requests, except when I'm waiting on somebody to approve my pull request, and I don't like them. But GitHub Enterprise and Azure DevOps both have this capability. We have GitHub Enterprise at our client, and works very well. So now what? What are you going to do, thinking about tribal knowledge, thinking about effective information management? You get into your rut, right? You're like, okay, sprint planning, do the work, sprint review, sprint retrospective. Okay, great. Now go back in that headspace and think about where you can capture information. How are you going to use your retrospectives better? How are you going to do that, right? So the big thing is to develop momentum. Because we're here in this room, I urge you to start now. Whatever single step you're going to take, it doesn't have to be perfect, but take action. Start small. Start with yourself. If you don't have a knowledge base of your own, start one. There's an author, Tiago Forte. He has a book and a program called Building a Second Brain, which is all about that set of information that you can manage, but you don't have to memorize. You can lean on it. Start with yourself. Up your game. I have been adopting Tiago Forte's model called PARA. It's project, areas, resources, and archives. So it's a way to arrange your OneNote, your Evernote. And it focuses on actionability. So if you're thinking, well, this is going to be boring, it's not going to help me, he provides ways in his model to think of it differently so that you can always organize your information around a project or a topic that you're working on. Make something great. You probably have gaps in your processes, and if you really are honest, you probably say, I can point to at least a couple things. You'd be surprised if you invest a little bit of time and attention into this, how much improvement you can make. Share things with others. This is a team effort, and if you start thinking as a team about these topics, you're going to see some benefit. Build momentum. So this is where I pause and you're like, is this momentum? No, it's a pause. It's all about your attitude. Now, I like this scripture. It's what I think of when I'm feeling kind of cynical. King Solomon in the book of Ecclesiastes says, I hated all my labor for which I had toiled under the sun, because I must leave it to the man who will come after me. And who knows whether he will be wise or a fool, yet he will rule over all my labor. This also is vanity. So you're like, what's the point? I'm gonna do all this work, and then I'm gonna leave, and they're just gonna let it, they're not gonna care, right? Stop making excuses. I don't think about that scripture all the time. In fact, I have to get myself in a different mindset. Now, remember this picture? You got the character that's apart from the others, right? Well, the question you have to ask yourself, are they a loner? Or are they a leader? Because in that moment where you said, let's flip the script, let's make this an opportunity, yes, you screwed up. Yes, you did something that they didn't expect. That is an opportunity to jump in and tackle that. Robert Baden-Powell founder of the Boy Scouts, said, try to leave this world a little better than you found it, and when your turn comes to die, oh, that's really encouraging, right? You can die happy in feeling that at any rate you have not wasted your time, but have done your best. So, yes, you will eventually leave all that work that you've done through some means. But if you can invest yourself and do your best, you're going to feel a lot better about it. Thank you. This is me again. If you want to connect over LinkedIn, my information is up there. I also have copies of the children's book if you're interested in seeing it, and that is all I have. Thank you very much. Oh, wait. Oh, all right. Yes.
What's the tow haul button do?
It turns it off.
But what is tow haul?
It's for if you're towing or hauling a car.
What does it do?
Keeps it from going in.
It keeps the gear like really low, or I think.
Yeah, it keeps it from going. I had a minivan that did that. If I towed my boat,
Yeah.
I pushed the button in, the Ford.
Yeah.
It wouldn't go into overdrive, and therefore be in a lower gear to haul.
I apologize. I need to tell that story better, right? Yeah, I hit the button and it turned it off. Yeah. Yeah, so, oh, yes, anytime I see somebody parked at the gas station, I walk up to them, they're complete strangers, and I say, do you know about tow haul mode? And they're like, who are you? And it was a little awkward. I found out that 10-foot trucks don't have that. So I was like, walked up to a guy with a 10-foot truck, and I was like, hey, do you know about tow haul mode? He's like, no. It didn't even have it, but I tell everybody that I can because it's helpful. So thank you.